Willy Schlacks is back, joining us from Columbia, Missouri. He's the co-founder and president of Equipment Share, a construction technology and equipment rental company transforming how contractors manage their fleets through connected hardware and software. Equipment Share recently went public on the NASDAQ, raising $747 million at over a $6 billion valuation. Willy, congratulations and welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate you having me back, Nick. It's good to be here.
So Equipment Share went public. Of course, congratulations on that. Not all companies choose to go public, particularly in the last 5 to 7 years or so. Why was it the right decision for Equipment Share?
Well, the question begs a really thoughtful answer, but I am not entirely sure that thoughtful is the thing that precipitates any high growth company when you're sort of deciding about the future, because the future is quite evolutionary. What we did know is we were always going to be in a growth mindset and growth mode because our ambition, what we're solving for, is quite large. This North Star is not something we would achieve within our lifetime, which is what I love. I love sort of the impossible problems of they persist past you, so you get to really lean in. But as far as the motivations for going public, those were evolving, but at the end of the day, it made a lot of sense for retention, employees, and being in the public markets, access to capital, cost reduction of capital and interest rates and all these other things. And then we really, my brother and I, like competition. We like sort of the, if you're going to be in something, be in the arena, that's the best. And that felt, like we were moving that direction too. We always like to aspire to be the best in the world at whatever we're going to put our minds to. Again, it's that reach, and going public felt like a natural evolution for all those things.
Good stuff. So we have many founders in the audience, some of which have raised B, C, D rounds and have thought about this process and have not been through it. Maybe you could start us out, just taking us behind the scenes a bit. When did the IPO process really start, and what was the most important priority to be prepared for?
I think most companies, if you've raised venture capital, you've got investors who are sort of whispering in your ear about, hey, this is absolutely the conclusion that you should be focused on. And the difference, I think, for a founder is that, they see this not as a conclusion, but they start to see this in a different light, as it's just a waypoint, as part of a journey. So as far as actually really leaning in, I think the whole SPAC era caught us by surprise, but there was a ton of inbound interest. Obviously, it's, in hindsight, you had a ton of SPACs. They just desperately needed something to reverse merge into. And any company with high growth and great EBITDA margins and, profitability was a bit of a diamond in the rough. But the period was so inflationary from a valuation perspective that SPACs just merged into anything that was breathing practically. Sometimes not. And, everything sort of collapsed a year or so later. But so it was just these waves of interest. As far as our motivations, because we're high growth, at that point, we had gotten past $1 billion in revenue, and the compliance of being public, it ratchets up. You have PCAOB compliance criteria that's definitely far more rigorous than if you're a company with no revenue. Like, going public with no revenue is quite simple. Going public with over $1 billion in revenue is a different scenario, and you really want to be prepared for that. And it's building out the team, it's building out all your systems and process, and that did take time, and it was good. Like, I would highly recommend it, because it is not a it's an effort that has legitimacy to most of it. But no, fundamentally, it is a very good process for a company to go through, and we learned a ton. I
Anything
fairly
that surprised you, Willie?
be kind. Um, some things, yes. I think you show up with perceptions of who the experts are, and then by the time you wrap up this process, you have a deep understanding of where the expertise lies. And there's an obvious statement here that being public is not terribly different than being private if you want to fundamentally know what is good, because a good company that has a great product and customer demand and grows and has the capability of building teams and a culture that reflects that. It doesn't matter where you are in history or in the sphere, private or public. That is all that matters fundamentally. Now, there's a lot of trimmings and then process that do come along with the necessity of going public for good reason. So you learn about all that. But yeah, on the other side of it, what I would say is the expert should be you after you get through this. And that's also fun because you learn a ton. But the perception of who are experts, I think, changes quite a bit by the time you get through it. So,
What,
um,
what did you find was the biggest difference between how public market investors evaluated the business versus the venture and the private markets?
public market investors, they their level of depth to their and urgency around their questions and the need to get to the root of what matters. Um, Definitely less in the private, fundraising experiences that I had over a decade. It went from disastrous macro environments to highly inflated macro environments, and private investors would generally reflect that to an extreme. Either there was extreme FOMO or you know just risk off, regardless of what they were looking at. Um, and occasionally, and I'm deeply grateful for a lot of our investors, because occasionally you find some of those investors that they do have a long view. That is super rare. I think every investor says they have a long view, but finding the ones that do is a bit more rare than what you would think. But the public investors, yeah, they, by and large, they all seemed incredibly intent and focused and serious on what mattered. And that was refreshing. I like that. Yeah, I had, and even now, it's still, there's a similarity in private public because they're your investor. They want to get to know you. They want to be there. And some of them are even, some are short term and they're very honest about that. Like, I'm not here forever. I'm here to make some money and I'm short term. And you need that in the market. And then some, really through their past investments, you can tell that they're long term. They really want to find something that's differentiated. And that's how they lean in with the questions. And that's how they lean in to get to know you. So, um, the boring answer is it's not terribly different, but there is a level of rigor and capability in public investors that, yeah, you would expect.
I saw that the stock jumped 33% on day one. Some may say that you left money on the table. I guess, how do you think about that? And did you ever even consider doing a direct listing, or was that not a path for Equipment Share?
We never seriously considered a direct listing. We looked at a lot of things, but we wanted to bring in new investors. We were 10 years into our company. Very grateful for all of our original investors, but they're ready to move on because of fund lives, as you would expect, or a bunch of them who had been in for so long. So, yeah, no, it was great bringing in new investors, and you can't really do that unless you have a bit of a public offering. You can't do that at scale and sell a percent of the company. I don't really mind the bump that occurs. I think what we were trying to do is assess our value in a pragmatic way and let the market decide from there. What I wouldn't want for myself or any investor is sort of to see a declining immediate reaction to that value, which, again, you're not really in control of all those things, but I think we approached it with a lot of pragmatism. We have our sort of Midwestern sensibility around what's common sense and what value means, and then we have such a optimistic view of where we'll be in the future because of the problem we're tackling. This is a $14 trillion industry. We are a drop in the bucket and yet we have a voracious appetite for solving problems and serving customers. Like painting that trajectory is not challenging to think about where that goes. But as far as where we're at today, it's like, that's not hard. Let's be pragmatic. And I think that benefited, our new investors, and I'm happy for that.
What would you say to early stage founders listening that maybe, I don't know, 5 to 7 years away from a public offering, aside from the core of, focusing on the business and the strategy and the customers and building something meaningful, what would you recommend they think about doing now to set themselves up for that moment?
Of all the things they could do, the investment in themselves is definitely the one that pays off the most. And what I mean by that is the ability to evolve. Because if you have those ambitions and you want your company to be a growth company that can actually enter the public markets because of that reality, it's going to reflect you. And if you yourself cannot evolve and grow and enjoy that environment, then you're not going to get there. Or if you do get there, it's going to be quite painful. So yeah, and maybe it feels like cliche, but having been on both sides of this, you don't know this until you get past it. But I would 1,000% say that, yeah, that you are the constraint of your company, whether you know it or not. And that's where a little bit of the, if you see it and you wonder, but you hope you're not, you believe you might get past it some other way, you're not going to. Like, you are that logjam, and the ability to see that, the sooner the better, and to invest in oneself so you can evolve and change. Because if change is not part of who you are, and it starts in the mind, I mean, theoretically everything's in the mind, but let's just say it starts in the mind, your ideas. Like, if you haven't changed your ideas about, most things that you're opinionated about, you should really question whether you do have that evolving capability. Or else you're saying, no, I'm just really right about everything. And I've never seen that. So, so regardless of what the ambitions are, this ability to, the introspective life that leads to change, I would say, is one of the most powerful things you can really start to learn and adopt.
Last time you were on the program, we discussed this very thing. We didn't get really into specific tactics. So when you say like investing in yourself, are there any specifics that you did to continue evolving? Besides just having an open mind, was it coaching? Is it therapy? Is it, something else?
Maybe I should do those things. Haven't done any of those. But I'm not saying those are good or bad or anything. This is just my own personal experience. I think for me, everything stems from the ability to stand alone in a bit and see and form a view on what you see. Because it would be nice if I could go to a therapist and they just, do some things. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is sweet. Now I'm ready for what's next. Or I have a coach and they just, tell me the things that's what's next. But I don't think maybe there's folks who have that experience. So I can only speak to my own experience. But yeah, from my own experience, like, facing the raw reality of being alone is the most powerful thing, because it happens up here. It's in your mind, and to distract from that feels like a distraction. Like, feels like you're headed towards another little side trail. Again, not these things could be levers. Maybe that's what people should really see them as. But that means it would point you back to this encountering yourself. You're somewhat alone, and that becomes enjoyable. Like, it's just freaking amazing. It's no different than, I say this as if I'm an outdoorsy person. My wife would just laugh if she heard me use this analogy, because I don't get enough time outdoors. But it's like if you're on that adventure out in the woods and it's just, there's only horizon, and somehow everything disappears except for that horizon, and things start to make sense, and the simplicity of life starts to emerge. I don't think that happens when you're sort of running to others to get the answers. You don't realize how much you have. And for an entrepreneur to whether it's the ambition of going public or building a massive company or transforming an industry, what you have to realize is the power that's in you is just shockingly amazing. And you don't run around and get it from somewhere outside. Like there's no pot at the end of a rainbow that's going to go, oh yeah, here's Nick. Or here's Willy.
How would you get yourself in that headspace? Is it exercise? Is it, morning walks? Is it meditation or,
I wish
self-talk?
I did more of, I wish I did more of all those things. I do a little bit of those things. I wish I did more of it. So I think those things are good. I think too, you have to also confront what you want. Because I know so many people that think that what they want is not good. And that fundamentally feels a little bit wrong to life. So, because if you want something, you're going to pursue it. But if you fundamentally feel misaligned with what you want, then guess what? You're misaligned. Like you're going to keep going around in circles. So, for whatever, everyone's got different journeys of how they process this information or their life and how it comes out in, the perception of themselves and, how they compose reality. But I think for me, a lot of it is facing that, what do I want? And when I first asked those questions, I was like, shit, I don't know. And that's a little bit terrifying because you're like, I'm doing all this stuff. How could I not want it? But to push, like you just keep pushing, push. Because there's something, I bet there is something that you can discover and it's probably not at your fingertips. And if it is at your fingertips, then step back and see it for what it is. But for me, that asking questions and enjoying the shocking reality of those questions and the aloneness of it is quite exhilarating. That sounds weird, but it is. I really enjoy it in the sense that so many other things are easier. Like it's getting out there and exercising. Everyone should do it. But it's also, I can put that on my calendar and go do that. But asking what do I want and realizing and inspecting the answers that emerge, if they're even answers, because probably what emerges is more questions.
What does Willy Schlacks want? If you're willing to share, what answers did you find when you went through this introspective set of questions?
Yeah, it's not a satisfying answer, I think, for most people who hear it, but there's a lot of tendrils on it. But the answer that ultimately emerged for me was, I have what I want. And that to me was shocking. Because how can you have what you want and still want? And then it begs the question of, well, what the hell is now? And what does time mean? Like, what is the future and what is the past? And I also really enjoy those questions too. We could get off into metaphysics and other stuff, but the answer surprised me ultimately. It wasn't a quick one either. Like, there's a whole laundry list of things that I muddled over before I encountered that one. But it is, and maybe it changes, but that's the one that really locked in and was quite surprising.
Yeah, it's amazing when we think back to when we were children and imagine, what does success look like for me, right? And I think, if I was 12 or 15 again, I always had dreams of being an entrepreneur, and I happen to be one, but one who invests in entrepreneurs. And I think I would have been, thrilled to see the business that I run and maybe more importantly, the family that I've built and et cetera. And so it's funny. We don't often step back and say, what did we really want? What do we really want? It's just kind of the endless climb.
We should be able to really observe and feel change in that too, because to think that a lot of those underlying motivations happen when we're young, like you said, but to think that we're suddenly locked into that is what many folks, don't expect or realize that is the motivator, but it's not really crystallize as far as what it means. It's just this feeling and these urges and, this push. But to recognize that the want is a choice, and that when the choice of what I have matches what I want, like, whoa, did I just win the lottery? And because that fills quite a void. No, I don't.
100%.
I don't know what's on the other side of that, because I still feel such a strong desire to create and build.
Sure.
So then I realized that, I want something is not necessarily married up to this desire to create, because that in and of itself is the want. It's like when I get worries and problems, it's like, geez, I'm lucky to be alive for this.
Totally.
Like this is incredible. And so obviously this theme of perspective is generally what emerges. And I like that, because I think we are in control far more than we realize.
Well, living in that journey day to day of the challenge, in the growth, in the learning, like that's a motivating thing just itself. It's such a wonderful thing to be a part of. But I do want to ask you more about the business. So maybe a decent place to start on that is with roll-up strategies. So they worked really well in private equity, and more recently have become quite popular in the venture space. Companies are acquiring local service providers, streamlining process and tech, and operating much more efficiently. Based on my read of the S1, equipment share was over 98% organic growth versus acquisition. Why did you pursue, an organic growth approach over just a roll-up of other equipment companies?
Probably because we didn't really start off, when we built this company, day one was not, hey, we're building an equipment rental company. That was simply a platform and a means to really serve customers. The thought in the inception was, all right, there's this problem we've experienced in the industry. Well, how big is it? It's a $14 trillion industry. And how big is this problem? Everyone has it. So that being the thought, there was no, solution of, oh, we could just buy the answer to that. There was no answer, because we experienced that problem for decades building within this industry. And no, we were very, we gravitated towards equipment rental because it was one of the areas where we felt this most severely. And so it naturally became a platform for us. But yeah, it's never been where we saw these domains as destinations. They are platforms to serve and really learn and evolve and build these solutions out. And I think that's why we've, at our evolution today, we've got this whole technology layer, this operating system that sort of underpins, our distribution. And that will keep evolving, but that is not the easiest way to build an equipment rental company. The easiest way to build an equipment rental company is go raise a bunch of money from people, buy, merge, and you're done. And then you can just sort of walk away and go, hey, that was great. But that's all you did. You built a financial outcome for you and some other folks. And that is boring. Like, just to do something that simply merges what exists. Actually, hopefully that doesn't sound negative. I'm sure there's a reasons for why people do this, but it doesn't feel like it fundamentally solves your customer problems. Like every day, your customer, they're, for us, our customers in the construction industry, they're building roads and bridges and homes and data centers and all this stuff. And we deeply understand that chaos, because that's what we did, for decades since we were kids. So there's this visceral connection with our customers. And we think about what it means to be, putting up steel when it's 6 degrees outside and you're up on a scissor lift, and then you drop the washer and you can barely move your fingers. Like, we know what all that feels like. So for us just to go, hey, let's merge some companies together and walk away, it wasn't a thought that ever bounced around in our head, because what would be the point? That adventure is not terribly fulfilling because the customer's still left there and nothing's really changed with their lives. So yeah, my brother and I, we deeply resonate with our customers, and the urgency that drives us is that we see how big the the opportunity and problem, two sides of the same coin, and how much more we can do. And that's, yeah. So 2% was not organic because certainly we're going to make smart choices about how we buy assets, but by and large, everything that we choose is around meeting that customer demand and really solving our problems.
So you had mentioned this is a $14 trillion problem that comprises people, materials, and machines. With regards to the materials and the machines components, are there opportunities to move up the supply chain in either? And is that part of the plan?
Yeah, we see this in two different domains. One is on the technology side. That's obvious, where our operating system is extensible to the industry. So different personas and types of companies absolutely will be using it beyond just equipment rental distribution. And then there's the other side, which is distribution. And we take a vertical approach because we've never believed that you could simply somehow build for this industry, build some technology and then people just show up and it's going to be adopting the right thing. Because fundamentally, we felt there was no platform. Like building narrow niches of software wasn't intriguing to us because we didn't really think that would ever create this connective tissue across an industry. And what I mean by that is that you have, like any industry, goods and services that flow through, and then ultimately, end up in this project environment where you're building something. And the supply chain of goods and then, the services that get orchestrated is highly complex. And then it's highly complex in the end result because the end result is a project environment, not a fixed manufacturing environment or retail or, like every other industry, which is you wire it up and don't change it. In this environment, everything is a proof of concept. Every new project is literally different than the last one. So the platform that enables that connectivity of goods and then orchestration of services has to reflect that it has to go pretty deep. At its depth, it's going to be very primitive, rooted, and simple. But the composition of it has to be incredibly flexible because it has to meet the needs of all these, entities where this flows through. The ultimate manifestation of any operating system platform is a marketplace, a digital marketplace. And that's simply because the analog marketplaces have always existed for 6,000 years. As soon as a human could go, hey, give me that and I'll give you this, you got a marketplace.
Yeah.
So to enhance that environment, because construction runs just fine if you think about, agnostic of a digital environment. But if you introduce a digital environment, then you go, wait, we could be a lot more efficient and better if we could actually measure instantaneously everything at the same time. But then the question is, well, how would you do that? Because it's so disconnected. So the answer is operating system platform level capabilities. So to get back to your question, there's really two paths here. One is, the operating system platform that we run our business on, and then the distribution on top of that. And we've gone very vertical with equipment rental because we never thought that somehow, one, we would build the right thing immediately, or two, that anybody in the industry would be happy to adopt something different and new. Because if things work from a monetary perspective, like if you're a big company making $1 billion of cash flow and you're sitting down and going, hey, let's change everything, nobody's going to agree to that. No one's going to sign up. So because we knew it took that appetite of, hey, let's change everything, we went vertical. And that's what has resulted in this really sizable platform and growth on the distribution side, in addition to our investment in the technology platform.
Many in the space have talked about this massive skilled labor shortage in construction. Is that a headwind? Is that a tailwind? How do you size that up?
I'm the worst person to ask about these things because I'm so optimistic about solutions to problems. Like, I'm like, okay, we'll figure it out. Like, when have we ever not, as humans, figured it out? Now, that is not a problem we're tackling head on. So I assume other people are, but I think it is right in the sense that it is absolutely one of the more obvious headwinds that's starting to emerge. And I think what that's going to do is just create a lot of opportunity for folks to come up with solutions to it. And there's obviously a lot of speculation around, the emergence of AI and automation and humanoids that could ultimately fill the gap at a point in the future. And that's somewhat indeterminate as far as timeline. But whether it's those things or efficiency that are gained, or even a huge labor shift from white collar to more blue collar, because the future of humans does look a lot more where we're doing things that we're developing a craft. If we go 20, 30 years in the future, like there's far less need to sit at a desk in the future, and far more of an opportunity to actually experience a human life where you're using all your faculties to create, and that's probably in a craft area or something. So that's way out there. That's the direction we're headed, which is great. All these changes with AI and technology developments are only going to accelerate that path. And I don't mind that. I think these are all good things.
So you mentioned AI earlier in the interview. You also talked about kind of the importance of having data and having insights on what's actually happening on a site, right? You've got the end customer of the site, you got developers, you got GCs, subs, AECs, project managers, it's messy, right? Talk to us a bit about the opportunity for AI and equipment share in the segment, and how do you extract the data that's required in order to, really drive value and drive sort of observability, on a construction site?
You have to eat away at it is the first thing, because it'd be easy if we were just theorizing about this. We could just come up with a couple things that are patterns in other industries and go, okay, we're done, check that box and move on. But if we want to think about the reality of, what we see as a company every day and the pragmatic, realistic path that's going to happen, you're eating away at it, because the future is a platform approach, but we're not there yet. So it does mean that you enable visibility and you're sort of turning on visibility to certain sectors, but they have to be somewhat holistic and make sense. So even for us, we don't expect customers to only use us. Now, a lot of times where we really excel is certainly in megasite environments, because our technology platform really just gives us an advantage to drive value to complex, large job site environments. We really shine in those environments. So there's definitely an advantage there. There's a real-time data insight availability and connectivity that we can bring to far more than just simply renting equipment. So that's good. But yeah, I think as when you're in it, it feels incremental. And it's only when you sort of look in hindsight and you see the overall impact of that incremental move and you go, oof, wow, that was, look at this arc over 5 years. But yeah, the today feels like, we're just chipping away at a new edge. Now, what I do like is that we're doing it. We're chipping away. Because back when my brother and I were building companies in this industry, it felt like nobody was chipping away at this. It was just like, holy cow, this is the same thing as 10 years ago. But and the momentum of that means nothing changes. There was such a stasis in that built environment. And the built environment is different than the design, phase of like architectural prints and drawings and all that. That's largely a content, digital environment. But so I think AI is massively supportive and helpful for data transformation and interoperability. What AI is not good at is deterministic functions. So you still need an underlying operating system that is deterministic. And on top of that, AI becomes even more enhanced. And we're constantly building out features and capabilities for ourselves and our customers, leveraging and learning about, what's next. But the second side of that is when you have a repository of data that's content based. An example would be, why do machines fail? Like, why does this machine fail? How do you fix it? That's also another prime spot for AI to extract value and deliver that to, both sides of the coin of operations and customers. But yeah, the ability to measure day one and then extract insights from this environment is it's definitely changed now than it was 5 years ago. And it's amazing to live during this time too, just to be part of something that's an order of magnitude shift. It's yeah. I don't know what it's done for your
What do you
industry, but
think?
I'm sure there's similar things where it's just like everything feels like it's changing. It's amazing.
What do you think the job site looks like in 5 years? You know, now that people are chipping away at this, including yourselves, whether it be autonomous sites, predictive equipment health, you know, fusion of the digital and physical world. Like, what does the job site look like in 5 years?
Yeah, I think 5 years, we're always a little optimistic. I think 10 years is where we underestimate. So let's call it 10 years out because that's,
Okay.
a little more speculation, but generally speaking, when there's momentum, 10 years is underestimated.
It's the right time frame for the venture investors out there and the builders.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, even some of our jobs are, they're 5-year jobs. So you just get to project number 2 by that time. But yeah, on that 10-year horizon, the direction that we're headed in, there absolutely are platforms or a platform that has emerged, which means you have answers to supply and demand that is instantaneous. What that means is that, say you want to build a house, you're going to have, it'll be very easy for you to articulate what type of house you want, where you want it. And there won't be friction around how would I build this, who would build it, and where are the things to build it. That's all going to be at your fingertips. If you want a certain type of window, you're going to know what type of window is the best window and where it's in stock and how long it will take to get there 6 months before you even build the house. If you want to know who is the best flooring contractor in the area, you'll have so much data and intelligence on who is the best flooring contractor based on the history and track record, not just simply on, AdWords. So, and that is simply all I'm doing is describing the outcome of a platform, an operating system, and the digital marketplaces that start to emerge. And it's hard to imagine that not happening. Now, what is difficult to imagine is all the other things that we can't imagine. So that's the stuff we underestimate. And it's easy to go and sort of apply patterns that we see elsewhere. And that is transformational in and of itself, because if you take and assume there's at least a 10% increase in productivity output, that's another $1 trillion of output for free that you get from an industry for free. Like, where can you find $1 trillion? Just go, boop, it's there. And that's just 10%. I'm using round numbers here for sake of, example, but that's just a 10% increase in output. Platforms, by and large, historically have had far more dramatic than simply a 10% increase in output. So that's where, our speculation can be a little bit sloppy and run wild, but also not be fantastical enough, because it probably, the economic impact to, countries and humans and all that is pretty remarkable at that point. Because I think we're also dealing with what I do know for certain is the human appetite is insatiable. So we can check that box. Like, we're never going to be satisfied. And what that means is simply that we're always going to have demand for goods and services. Because I think a lot of people go, wait, you won't have to work in the future and, everything's done. Like, we just sit in a couch and go, okay, DoorDash is good. It's like, no, humans are so creative at a visceral level for their appetites, because as soon as they taste, they want something more that's transformed, different, or, fill in the blank. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing, because it drives our creativity and it satiates curiosity and creates new ones. So those are all good things. So we are working in the future versus the dystopian views of nobody's working and, half the population's out of a job. I don't really think that's real. What we can't imagine is all of these creative things we've come up with to fill our curiosity and our insatiable appetites. And I don't say that in a negative sense. I say that insatiable appetite in a very positive human sense. Like, that's a good part of, who we are. So that's the stuff I'm really excited to see emerge, because what it also means is that humans have more choice. And if they have more choice, they're going to start asking the question of, what do I want? And
That's
then
right.
they're going to realize that, wait, what if that void is not there? And the real question is, what do I want to create? And then the answer to that is fucking anything. And that is just off and running.
Well, and humans can spend more time on things that they're truly interested in and good
Yeah.
at, as opposed to just, what pays the bills and what
Yeah.
helps them get by.
Hopefully for humans, the fear, I mean, this will take more than 10 years because we've got, God knows how many years of this embedded in our DNA, but the fear is such a part of our motivator. I mean, it is so deep. Nobody escapes us today. Literally nobody. It is such a part of our motivator that we don't even know what that looks like. A world where humans are not motivated, as fear is one of the underlying, sticks that sort of poke us. Like, oh,
Yeah.
you might run out of money, or what you shelter, you need a bigger house, or whatever. Like, or what do you look like to your neighbors, or status, or all. Like, so much of that is fear driven, and fear is the worst corrupter of creativity. Like, it
Hmm.
just strangles it. Um, so where you and I will have no ability to predict the future is the absolute shocking, amazing reality of humans that are not so intertwined with fear, but they're actually free to create. The things they're going to create are just going to be shocking to us.
How does one manage that? It is evolutionary built into our DNA. How do you manage the fear and reduce its impact so that your mind is free to be as creative as it can be?
I try to circle back around on it and go, well, I'm fine with that, you know, and defang it. Because if you push against it, it just sort of reinforces it. I also recognize that, yeah, you've got, however many, whatever somebody subscribes to as far as the millions of years of humans running around in caves and, running away from animals and fear that's just innate to our daily behavior. It's there. It's so embedded. So I see it more as I'm not trying to be the human of 100 years from now. So I want to just see who I am today. And I think when you see it, it loses its fangs. And then you can sort of laugh at it and, see what tomorrow brings. But um, yeah, I'm not trying to put up any huge layups for myself as far as, evolutionary human steps here. Um, I think it's just enjoyable to recognize. I like recognizing and speculating, because the speculation for me always leads to, it's just surprising how incredible that future is. Um, and the more you know, the more I spend time speculating about that, the sillier the dystopian views look. Even though I'm a sucker for a dystopian, story. I love it because it goes back to our survival. Like, there's nothing more meaningful than survival. So we all love having to survive, and it's so freaking easy because you never have to ask any questions. You just go, I'm running from that freaking thing that's going to kill me, and then to make up whatever the hell it is. But you do not have to be introspective. Everything's external, and just starting fire is like, yeah, job well done, good, okay. Now I'm a worthy thing. So, but if you sort of push that aside and you think about the non-dystopian future, the what could exist is it's just mind blowing. So I'm excited for that.
All right. Just a few quick wrap up questions here. Willie, what book, article, or video would you recommend to listeners?
Well, since I brought up Lincoln, the author of um, A Team of Rivals, his name is Doris Kern. Yeah, don't look it up. Team of Rivals in the book. Doris, I think, is the lady who wrote that. Amazing author. Like, absolutely love that book. But just to put a cliff note on the fact that his when I think about the how much I admire who that person is, she's very influential in that. She did so much work to uncover sort of the raw story and narrative by piecing together all these other perspectives from folks around him. And the title of the book is just, spot on because at the end of the day, if you're trying to describe, who Lincoln is, he was this politician who ended up with a team of rivals. And think about in this modern era that we live in, our generation, like what politician has as part of their cabinet and confidants folks who were enemies in their minds, like who were against this person. But because of the maturity and thoughtfulness, they came around to see things, and they wanted to get on your bandwagon. They said, hey, you know, in other words, people are changing around you because of just the life that you're living. It's not happening now. I can tell you that. Like we couldn't come up with a short list of anybody in leadership it's the opposite. Again, not trying to discount the humans that are there. It's a hard job to do, but someone like that is so once in not a generation, but a century type thing that
Sure.
I hope I live long enough to see it happen again, because that'd be pretty special to watch. But um, yeah, it's a great book. Highly recommend it. Just because it's on my mind since we're talking about him, and she did a phenomenal job.
Willie, do you have any habits that are a secret weapon?
My gut reaction is no. That also doesn't feel right. Um, Now, I think what I would say are the things that I couldn't do without are, I don't know that I'd describe them as habits. I would describe them more as the ceremony of life. Like, in the morning I wake up, have my coffee, maybe there's a fire. And if I'm having coffee with my wife, like that ceremony, there's not a lot of other things in life that would want more than that.
Sure.
And then when you realize what you want is what you have, it just makes it even a bit better. Like it's just so magical. Um, but yeah, when I think about the habits I should have, that's sort of a negative pattern of mine. So I'm sure most people don't struggle with this, but I'm like, oh, I should be doing more things. I should get out there and run every day, or do more of this and that. So the new thing for me is really finding the ceremonies that are just like, holy cow, this is just so more and more of your day, you're just encountering your own fantasy, and you just feel incredible to be alive for this. So the
Amazing.
more it's like, yeah, this happens every day, it becomes this thing that, whether it's a habit or a ceremony, I don't care. I'm not great with the word habit because, yeah, that's me though, but I'm putting a new label on it. And yeah, those anything that happens every day that feels like that, like, yeah, that's a foundation you can do quite a bit on.
Awesome. Well, every conversation with you, Willie, is a moving experience. I'm so glad that you joined us again. Congrats again on the IPO and all the success. And looking forward to hearing more in a couple of years.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it. Yeah, really appreciate you having me on, and yeah, really enjoyed this.
Thank you, sir.